Okay, beta. So now we are talking about oculomotor nerve. So oculomotor nerve is the third cranial nerve, and we know like it is supplying extraocular muscles. If you remember the names of extraocular muscles, so we have superior rectus, inferior rectus, medial rectus, lateral rectus, superior oblique, and inferior oblique. So we have these six muscles which are very important extraocular muscles. See, all these muscles they are supplied by 3, 4, 6 cranial nerves, third, fourth, sixth. So if you remember the code SO4 LR6, SO4 that means superior oblique is supplied by trochlear, LR6 in the sense lateral rectus is supplied by abducent. So remaining all extraocular muscles, whatever we studied, they are all being now supplied by the third cranial nerve that is oculomotor nerve. Okay. So this is the third cranial nerve which is distributed to extraocular as well as intraocular muscles. Now see here, if you just look into this picture, see what is this? This is brainstem. Chavi, are you able to hear me? Ritika, Chavi, please keep confirming and keep talking so that it will be a motivation. Okay. See, this is brainstem. You are finding midbrain, pons, and medulla oblongata. So see,
Yes, ma'am.
okay, beta. So from this midbrain, see at the level of midbrain, you are finding there is one cranial nerve coming out that is oculomotor nerve. Okay. How is it entering into the orbit? There is an opening which is called as superior orbital fissure. So through superior orbital fissure, it is entering into the orbit. Now, if you just try to recollect the picture of cavernous sinus, okay, what we have studied as an essay question. So lateral relations of cavernous sinus, if you observe laterally, you are finding third cranial nerve, that is oculomotor nerve. That means once it passes through, so it is actually coming out through the midbrain, then it is forming lateral relations with the cavernous sinus, and then it is entering into the superior orbital fissure. Okay, once it is entering into the, now see here, this is our oculomotor nerve. So this is the cut section of midbrain, what you are finding. Okay. So in the midbrain cut section, you will see it is coming from the nucleus. Third oculomotor nucleus and Edinger-Westphal nucleus is joining. Okay, this is the red nucleus what we see at the section of midbrain. So once it is emerging from midbrain, you can see it is passing through the lateral wall of the cavernous sinus. And this fissure what you are finding is, what is this? Superior orbital fissure. So through superior orbital fissure, now it is entering into the orbit. So once it is entering into the orbit, you can observe, if you just practice this diagram, you can write your answer in your own words. Now it is dividing into superior and inferior divisions. Now, in this upper division or lower division also you can see. See, the lower division is larger in size and upper division is smaller in size. So, the upper division is supplying the levator palpebrae superioris and superior rectus. Remaining muscles, what we have, the medial rectus, then inferior oblique and inferior rectus. So, these are supplied by the inferior division. Okay, lateral rectus is not supplied by oculomotor nerve. It is supplied by which nerve? LR6, abducent. But oculomotor nerve goes and gives few twigs to the ciliary ganglion. Okay, the ciliary ganglion, what we see inside the orbit, which is going and supplying the ciliaris muscle, which are actually controlling the pupillary like constriction and dilatation. Okay, so you have to practice this diagram for oculomotor nerve. Okay, now once you know all these oculomotor nerve, it's an essay question. Mm, see, it's a third cranial nerve distributed to extraocular as well as intraocular muscles. So it is somatic motor nerve. So it is in series. That means it is closely related to the fourth, sixth. That means it is also, we know like fourth, sixth are also supplying the extraocular muscles, and very close we also have hypoglossal nerve coming from the very, this is all related to the brainstem thing what he is telling us. Okay, these are the components. General somatic efferent for the movements of eyeball. Somatic is the one which is going towards the surface. Efferent means they have motor component. Okay, visceral is parasympathetic. I told you it is going and supplying the pupil for the pupillary constriction for accommodation. General somatic afferent column carries proprioceptive fibers. Okay, that is proprioception. I have discussed in physiology class in detail. Muscle spindle, that is for position sense from the extraocular muscles to mesencephalic nucleus of trigeminal nerve. Okay, so the nucleus, what we have seen in the diagram, the oculomotor nucleus and Edinger-Westphal nucleus. Okay, so from here the nerve comes out and its course is it is traversing laterally through the cavernous sinus and it is entering into extraorbital fissure. Okay, and then you will see will be dividing into the superior and inferior divisions. From the diagram, you can write this complete thing better. Now coming to the applied anatomy, complete and total paralysis of third nerve results in ptosis. What is ptosis? Drooping of upper eyelid is ptosis because like it is supplying levator palpebrae superioris, isn't it? Through its superior division. Suppose if levator palpebrae superioris is paralyzed because of the like damage to oculomotor nerve, you will see drooping of upper eyelid. There will be lateral squint. Okay. Then pupillary constriction is one of the function, isn't it? So the visceral component, it supplies the pupil. So that is also lost, loss of accommodation. Okay, there may be forward projection of the eyeball. That's what is slight proptosis, and there may be double vision. All these are due to the damage of the oculomotor nerve. Okay, pupillary light reflex in the sense when you look at bright object, usually there should be pupillary constriction that is absent, and in fact it will lead to pupillary dilatation which may damage the eyeball. Like excessive light rays may enter into the retina and it may be harmful. Okay, so these clinical components are enough better. Then what is the next question you have shared? Palatine tonsil. This we have discussed many times. So where is palatine tonsil situated? In the oropharynx, isn't it? What are the presenting parts? It has upper pole, lower pole, anterior border, posterior border, medial surface, and lateral surface, isn't it? What are the two folds in between which you will see palatine tonsil is situated? Palatoglossal arch and palatopharyngeal arch. What are the muscles we have there? In the palatoglossal arch, we have palatoglossus. In the palatopharyngeal arch, we have palatopharyngeus muscle, isn't it? Mm. Then what are the structures forming uh, bed of the tonsil? It's very, very important. Which constrictor muscles we see there? 229 page, palatine tonsil. Mm. What are the blood vessels supplying? These are all Viva questions what I'm asking you. And you are keeping mute. Okay, fine, no problem. Mm. Okay, better. Now see here, this is our palatine tonsil. Okay, so which is situated in the oropharynx. So this is the upper pole. You should just consider it like this. It has upper pole, lower pole, anterior border, posterior border, and surface near the midline is medial surface. Surface away from the midline is lateral surface. And whatever structures you are finding here, this is actually tonsillar bed. Okay, you are finding there is a capsule which is covering it, and below that you are finding palatine vein. Okay, palatopharyngeus muscle, and this is superior constrictor muscle. Apart from that, you have ascending pharyngeal artery, palatine artery, tonsillar artery, facial artery. These are all structures what we see in the bed of the tonsil. Okay, on the medial surface of the tonsil, you will see there will be inward folds which are called as crypts. One of the crypt is quite big in size. You call it as crypta magna, also called as intratonsillar cleft. Okay. There is one more picture which also see this is completely oropharynx. You can see. Okay, this is the tonsil, oral surface of the tonsil, where you have these crypts. These are the structures what we see in the bed of the tonsil. Okay, paratonsillar vein you are finding, pharyngobasilar fascia, superior constrictor muscle, buccopharyngeal fascia. Okay, then you are finding facial artery, styloglossus muscle, glossopharyngeal nerve, and so much of venous plexus, that is the pharyngeal venous plexus. Okay, lower down we also find submandibular salivary gland. So this you have to be thorough because it has come. It's very easy as a question. In fact, if it comes, you can easily write this. Okay, you also just read it once, you will understand. Okay. Then blood supply, very good picture is there. Nearby blood vessels, whatever are there, they are all supplying the tonsil. Like this is external carotid artery. So we have pharyngeal arteries coming from lingual artery, facial artery, ascending pharyngeal artery, then maxillary artery. All of them will give pharyngeal branches. Okay, beta? Correspondingly, we will have veins that will drain into pharyngeal plexus of veins. Okay, lymphatics will drain into jugulo-digastric group of lymph nodes. Nerve supply, glossopharyngeal and lesser palatine nerves. And when you want to see the histology, this is one crypt because it is present in the oral cavity. You will see it is lined by stratified squamous non-keratinized type of epithelium. And just surrounding this crypt, underlying that, you will find these are all lymphatic nodules. The periphery of the nodules, you will find darker mature lymphocytes, and central pale area will be there, which shows like these are immature lymphocytes. Okay, underlying that, you will find the skeletal muscle. Okay, beta. So that is all about palatine tonsil. If there is any infection, you call it as tonsillitis. There may be abscess around the capsule. You call it as peritonsillar abscess. Removal of tonsil is tonsillectomy. And during tonsillectomy, we should see like we should not allow any blood clot to remain in the bed of the tonsil because more and more blood clots are there, more will be the bleeding. Uterus and tonsil are the two areas where bleeding can be controlled by the removal of blood clots. Okay, beta? So tonsillitis and quinsy is, suppose this is the intratonsillar crypt or crypta magna. Suppose if pus is collecting here, you call that condition as quinsy. Okay, that is about this tonsil. And then fornix. Where do we find fornix? Cerebellar peduncles. Okay, fornix and cerebellar peduncles is from neuroanatomy. Fornix, where do we see? Chavi? Fornix. Ritika. Not conjunctival fornix. Okay. Cerebellar peduncles. We'll see first. Cerebellum. Are you listening to me? Both of you are with me? Ritika? Chavi? Okay, beta. Cerebellum has 3 peduncles, right? Like it has connection with the brainstem, isn't it? So it has connection with midbrain, it has connection with pons, and it has connections with medulla oblongata. Okay. So connections with the midbrain, you call it as superior cerebellar peduncle. The connection between pons and cerebellum is middle cerebellar peduncle. And the connection between medulla oblongata and cerebellum, you call it as inferior cerebellar peduncle. Okay. Now, in all these peduncles, you will see, now the peduncles is the question. You have to be thorough with this table. I gave you one code. Do you remember? For inferior cerebellar peduncle, I gave you a code. What is that? POP CV star. POP, CV and star. Okay. So afferent tracts are coming from different areas and they come and relay in the cerebellum. Superior cerebellar peduncle, you have anterior spinocerebellar and tectocerebellar. Tectum means midbrain, spino means spinal cord. Okay, efferents are starting from the cerebellum and going to some distant area. Cerebello-rubral. Red nucleus, we know it is present in midbrain. Dentatothalamic. What are the four nuclei we see in the cerebellum? D, E, F, G. Dentate nucleus, emboliform nucleus, fastigious nucleus, and globosus. That's why from dentate nucleus to thalamus, dentatothalamic. From dentate nucleus to medulla oblongata, that is olivary nucleus, dentato-olivary. Fastigio reticular. Reticular formation we find throughout the brainstem. Okay, diffuse group of gray matter. What we have in the brainstem is reticular formation. So in the middle cerebellar peduncle, which is connecting cerebellum and pons, we have pontocerebellar pathway. Inferior cerebellar peduncle, all these POP CV star, you just try to remember. Posterior spinocerebellar, olivocerebellar, para-olivocerebellar, cuneo-cerebellar, vestibulocerebellar, stramedillaires, trigeminocerebellar, anterior external arcuate fibers, reticulocerebellar. Then here also I gave you one code, OVR, cerebello-vestibular, cerebello-olivary, and cerebello-reticular. Okay, this is about cerebellar peduncles. Now the question is also fornix. I am wondering if it is there here. If not, you better study from Vishram Singh or IB Singh, whichever other book we have with us, but it should be there. Fornix. Actually, very good picture is there in Netter's Atlas showing fornix. Cerebrum chapter. Deeper in diencephalon region below thalamus, we will see. Cerebrum chapter. If you are checking, just please let me know the page number. Chavi Ritika. Yeah, with cerebrum. I'll try to check for fornix. See here, beta. See, this is corpus callosum. This is septum pellucidum. This yellowish area. If you cut septum pellucidum deeper inside, you will have lateral ventricle. Below this, round like this, it is one of the part of limbic system. You are finding this is fornix. Okay. So explanation, we will check where it is given because in index page number is not specified. This is also fornix only, but this one. Small things, fornix. I'll share the photograph from Netter's Atlas later, Vita. You can write. I don't think much is given in Charas. Okay, we'll go with the other answer now. Okay, what is motor speech area? Chavi? Area number 44 and 45. Okay, which is concerned with motor speech. Okay, now we'll go with upper limb questions. We'll open upper limb now. Okay, hope you are seeing this. Okay, radial artery is a branch of which artery, Chavi? brachial artery, isn't it? Radial artery. Forearm. Here we will have it. 107. Yes, better. Now, we know like continuation of axillary artery in the forearm, in the arm, you call it as brachial artery. And the brachial artery at the neck of the radius, you will see it will divide into two. What are those? On the medial side, we have ulnar artery, and the lateral side, you will see radial artery. We know radial artery will be passing through anatomical snuff box, where it is very much superficially situated, and you can palpate the radial pulse. From there, you will see it will be entering into the palm, taking part in the formation of superficial and deep palmar arches. Okay, so this is a rough thing. You see here, this is brachial artery, and you can see it is running over the supinator muscle. Okay, the pronator teres, then flexor digitorum superficialis, running over pronator quadratus between like flexor pollicis longus and the pronator quadratus. Finally, it will be entering into the anatomical snuff box, and then it will be entering into the palm. Okay, better dividing into the superficial and deep branches, leading to the formation of arches, superficial and deep palmar arch. Okay, beta. So radial artery is smaller terminal branch of brachial artery in cubital fossa. It runs downwards. You just read it once, beta. You will understand. Okay. Then biceps brachiae. What is the origin of biceps brachiae? Biceps. That means it has two heads. No. From where is the long head coming? From where is the short head coming? And where is the insertion? What is the action? Biceps. Here you have biceps. This is, see, short head is coming from the coracoid process and long head is coming from supraglenoidal tubercle. Insertion is on radial tuberosity. Nerve supply is musculocutaneous nerve, and action is, it is strong supinator. Okay, beta. So formation and fate of the pharyngeal clefts, there will be a table in embryology textbook. You can easily refer that. Pharyngeal plexus of nerves. What are the cranial nerves you will have? Glossopharyngeal, vagus, and hypoglossal. Cleavage lines of skin in the face. These are the lines which you will see in the epidermis and dermis, along which the lines of incision should be given during surgical techniques and also during dissection. Histology of elastic cartilage. What you will have? Outermost covering is basically perichondrium, which is absent here, and then you will see the chondrocytes, okay, inside the lacunae. Examples of elastic cartilage: epiglottis, external ear. Motor speech area, I told you. Inferior radioulnar joint, how is it formed? Between the radius and ulna. Okay. So in the inferior aspect, you will have, see this one. You have head of the radius and ulnar notch in the of the radius in the ulnar bone. Here you will have the inferior radioulnar joint. There is a table which will help us to easily remember. Yes, beta, inferior radioulnar joint. This one. Pivot type of synovial joint formed between the head of the ulna and ulnar notch of radius. Like any other joint, it is also surrounded by joint capsule. Interior, you will have the like synovial membrane filled with synovial fluid. So you will see the ligaments are triangular fibrocartilaginous articular disc is there. Okay. Anterior and posterior interosseous arteries will give blood supply, and same name anterior and posterior interosseous nerves. Action is supination and pronation. Okay, beta. So that is all about today's paper. So we will stop here and see you on Monday, beta. Okay. Bye. Take care.